Welcome back to our second hour. Our Friday topic today is VPNs, or virtual private networks, a way to carve out communication pathways that, unlike the open interwebs, are more controlled and point-to-point perhaps. One place we use them on office hours is our global coverage of events, such as our NAB coverage. And today we're going to be diving into discussing how they work, some of the things they're particularly good for, and how to set them up and use them to help operate the kinds of live shows we do every day here on office hours. To help us, some of our longtime panelists and tech crew members are with us. I'm specifically speaking of John Wallace. Guy Cochran's in the house. I know Jason Bache also dips his toe into this stuff, so maybe we should start with the basics. Who among us wants to talk at a very basic freshman level about what a VPN is and why it's important for a show like Office Hours? Anybody want to dive into this? Let's go John Wallace. John?
Yeah, so for office hours, our VPN is very important because we use tools like Cloudflare, which allow us to expose specific parts of our infrastructure out to the remote TDs that we have, to the people who are handling audio, to our EIC, to make sure that the show is able to be functional and smooth no matter where you are.
John, can you define EIC for those who might not know the jargon of this?
Yeah, so our EIC JJ is our engineer in charge. He is the one responsible for maintaining the infrastructure, make sure everything is going smooth. If there's any sort of technical difficulties, he's the first one that's in contact who can start. He is the head in charge. He's our guy, keeping everything rolling. He's helped me a ton with setting up the infrastructure that we have here today that we're running off of. Him and Mickey and several others have really stepped up to run that back end and makes this show as smooth as possible and look as good as it does. When it comes to the VPN portion, for NAB, we used a few different solutions to be able to bring in content, to also establish links between us and several different sites in order to have the comms, the video, the remote control. What Guy was able to do with controlling the FR7's camera, those are all using different VPN technologies. And to break it down, a VPN is just a virtual network. So think about if you were to plug a cable into a switch, that's a real physical network. You're doing the same thing virtually by connecting to the VPN. It's allowing you access into that network like you were sitting there in that same subnet. So it's very powerful. It's used in businesses, obviously. It's used for productions. It's used for simple things at home. I use a VPN in order to access the infrastructure here from my own home. So things like that, it's really important. It's can really make a game changer for many different organizations, as well as allow you to connect two different sites and not let them operate as if they're one local network, which definitely helps when you're talking about like potentially connecting two different stages and be able to see information from both and manage both those things at the same time, even within a local LAN.
So when you set these up, is it basically for the purposes of remote control always, or is there some other function that these VPNs do?
It allows you to bypass WAN. So you can essentially have a direct connection between these two sites. You can drag and drop files from computer. You're no longer exposed to everything that's out there on the internet. You're allowed to, these two computers or these two computer and server are able to operate like they're working on the same network. So it's not just for remote control. It's for any type of data sharing that needs to happen in a secure way in a private environment.
Excellent. Nigel, you wanted to get in on this?
I was just going to give Nigel a simple example, which might be entirely wrong, but this is how I think about it. Imagine I was driving between you and me, Bill, between Austin and San Diego. I would have to go on public roads. I'd have to go on highways. I'd have to go in things where I'm going to meet other people, and there are bad people out there. So I don't want to meet those people. So it's like we've created a private road between your house and my house that only you and I can drive down. No one else can get on that road. No one can see us. Nobody needs to know what we're doing. We're not going to interact with anyone else. You know, in the old days, we used to use a word called tunneling, and I like that word. It's like we built a tunnel between your house and my house that only we can go through. It's obviously more complicated there because the tunnel extends to other places. But the best way to think about it, I've always thought, was it's like a secure place that protects you so the outside can't get to you.
That's lovely. I like that, and I want to have lunch with you now. Let's go on to the next. We got a lot of questions packing up. I'm really surprised. This has been a very hot topic today, so we'll dive into it right away. Let's go to our first question.
All right, our first one's from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. Our university connection is routinely a gig up and down. At home, I'm getting 900 megabits per second down and about 150 megabits per second up. But using the required Palo Alto VPN drops it drastically to more like 70 down and 50 up. What's going on?
Jason and John are going to help us. Jason Beisch.
Boy, could be any number of things. Do you mean your school has great connection and your ISP in Pennsylvania is requiring Palo Alto VPN, in which case you're traversing the country for VPN? Maybe John should take this. Like I had to read the question again and I didn't really understand.
John?
Yeah, so what is typically happening is there's going to be what we talked about earlier, quality of service, guidelines that are going to be set up in that firewall. You are sharing this with everybody who needs to VPN into that university. And so making sure that you understand, like, you're not going to get your full bandwidth. There is also, on top of it, because of encryption, you're losing 20% of your throughput as well, just due to what is going to be required overhead to manage that VPN connection. Obviously, the 70 and 50 is way more than 20%, but most places, most businesses are not going to allow you to consume all their bandwidth for one client. That's just not something that is palatable. 70 down, 50 up is very good for a VPN connection, and I would assume you can do anything you need to do outside of maybe transferring files, large files back and forth. But that is pretty typical and honestly higher than I see from most organizations.
So basically what I'm understanding here is that whoever's managing the connection can parcel out bandwidth to each of the users or to groups of users, and you may be limited by a decision they're making at the head end of this.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana asks, Tailscale, Netbird, Netmaker, ZeroTier. Netbird seems to work best with NDI. Has this been everyone else's experience too?
And no one has raised their hand on this, and unfortunately, I am the least capable technological person, I think, on this panel today. So I don't know if I have an answer for you, Chris. Well, John Wallace is going to take a shot at it. So, John, what's your thought?
I don't know that I would rely on any sort of VPN to do that. I would rather be able to publish that, use the NDI bridge, and have a direct connection where you're not going to have that unnecessary overhead. That would be my 2 cents. If you have a specific use case you want to share more about and why that makes sense for you, I'd be happy to talk through it.
Okay, there you go. Let's go to the next question.
Samuel Nordvik in Norway asks, do you have an idea for a solution to manually switch between two WANs without needing to log into a router's interface, like a router with API controls?
Jason Beisch.
Well, sure. I mean, I would be shocked to see a router that didn't have some sort of failover mechanism that couldn't be controlled, via SSH over its own VPN. And my immediate thought is, like, all of them. And just anything, even remotely professional, you can absolutely do that.
All right, let's move to the next question.
Roland Booth in Jamaica asks, what is the top 3 or 5 VPN applications that the team would recommend?
I only have experience with IPVanish, which is the only one I use with the occasions that I need it. But Jason, dive into more detail.
Okay, I don't think you mean applications. Are you talking about protocols? Because a protocol makes a whole bunch of impact when it comes to VPN. So, OpenVPN takes longer to establish a connection than WireGuard. It has slower download speeds compared to the WireGuard protocol. It's usually capped at around 150 meg on Windows machines due to the oddities of the tap adapter. So, I mean, I wouldn't be using, I guess my answer is don't use an app. It should either be integrated into the OS or nothing.
John Wallace?
Yeah, I think we need to know more, Roland, about what your use case is, what you're looking to do before we can really answer that. There's many different types of VPNs, and what you're looking to solve for, what type of connection you need, how you want to manage that. Those are some things that we should know before we recommend any sort of client to you.
And our focus generally here on the show is attaching two people to share a lot of data and files and come into somewhere in this kind of walled garden. Other people use them for a lot of different things. I mean, we were hearing from Nigel earlier about the fact that he wants to get a piece of content that is restricted from his area, so he'll VPN to someplace else and appear to be coming from someplace else. Am I talking about two totally different things, or is this all just functionality that all the VPNs have, and you decide which aspects of it to deploy?
Yeah, so if you talk about Nigel's use case where he wants to access maybe content from the UK, from the US where it's geo-blocked, then you're looking at, you need a VPN provider that has a host or a server within UK then that isn't blocked by that provider, because that's always the rat race chase of, they find out who's doing it, then they block them, then you change the IPs, and it's this whole runaround. But there's different use cases. Do I need to access something at home? Maybe I run it on my Ubiquiti Dream Machine. I have a VPN solution where I can then access anything I need from home. You have another solution where I need to access in a remote location. Maybe a Cloudflare tunnel is the best solution. There's just so many different applications for why you would use a VPN. It can be difficult to just say, this is the best one, use it, when you have no idea what the use case is. People use them in gaming to get better games. Like, so you can remove some type of matchmaking that's based upon skill, and so you can make it so they can't find something within the time frame, and it removes it. That's another use case for a VPN, way outside of office hours scope, but it just goes everywhere. These are ubiquitous across many things.
Thank you for that. That helps me understand the scope of why this tool is so important to know something about if you want to ascend the ladder of being able to do global discussions and other things. So interesting. Thank you, John. Let's move on to the next question.
All right, next question's from me. I have a Ubiquiti Edge Router. Does it support VPN service?
Jason's going to start us off. Jason?
So Edge routers with EdgeOS firmware 2.0.9 and later support all of the following protocols, and there's your QR code. So like a whole bunch of VPN, yeah.
Okay, so there we go. Now it's gone. So let's move to the next question.
David Brady in New York asks, I often need to consume foreign content that even VPNs will geo-block. Besides needing to change system time to Jaan Standard time, smartstreaming.tv works wonders as alternate DNS with no install. Is this approach reliable?
Boy, nobody again raised a hand on that, so you may be in a use case. Well, there you go. John Wallace is going to help us out. John?
Yeah, I've never used smartstreaming.tv, but like I said before, this is a game of like cat and mouse. They're always looking for ways to protect their content. I'm sure within their contracts, they have to, do reasonable things to protect their IP properties. And these things include shutting down different fencing solutions, understanding how people are accessing the content. If they believe it's from sources that aren't within that country or within that provided range, they have to take measures. So use it for as long as you can, and then go find another mouse and enjoy again while you kind of run those things down. It's the beauty of the internet, We're just always running in circles. So
you guys are going to do that while I'm going to look up Jaan Standard time and learn about it. So next question.
Next question is from Jonathan Michelson in Buenos Aires, Argentina. When trying to stream SRT from iPhone to WinPC with the same institutional network with ZeroTier VPN, it worked for soundcheck but cut out before going live. Can router security rules get into effect after time/bandwidth? I'm at a loss here.
Guy Cochran's going to start us off. Guy?
Yeah, I'd imagine that's what happened. I'm not a networking expert, but I do know that there's ports that you have to open up with SRT, and if they're not open, then you need what's called a proxy server. So I use SRT mini server, and I use a proxy. So I have an AWS E2C EC2 instance that I use as a proxy, so I could have other feeds. I give people that IP address so they don't see my own IP, it turns it around and then shoots it to me, and it opens up the ports so that they don't have to open up ports on their end. It's opened up in the cloud. So that's one way of getting around it is SRT mini server with a proxy server. But besides that, I'm not sure how internally that route or that network management system might be detecting some kind of anomaly and just shutting down that port for a security threat.
Oh, I'm told in the comments that that was a typo. He meant Japan Standard Time, so I don't have to go look that up after all. John Wallace, continue the answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. I don't know the reason if you're on the same network to use ZeroTier. So maybe some more information about why you would use a VPN for something that would be local to the subnet. You're essentially pinning the traffic up and coming back down. At any point, you could have triggered some sort of alarm on a firewall. You could hit some sort of bandwidth rule that you're going to hit a new QoS policy, and all of a sudden they're going to shut that down and won't operate. Especially if you don't own the network, the best thing to do is to run your own network and then keep that off of any sort of need to go outside of what is in your control. Obviously, there's times where we have to sacrifice and do that, but as much as you can, keeping that within your control would be best.
Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Nathan Cashin from Oregon City. I set up a Tailnet with exit node to browse from home while traveling, but I realized I could not access the initial login screen from Captive Wi-Fi networks until I turned it off. Is this expected? Workarounds.
Jason, what do you think?
Okay, in 2 minutes, I don't really want to get into workarounds, but yeah, if you can't connect to do your initial connection and authentication, it's not going to work. So yeah, be sure that the Starbucks you're using is at very least authenticated before you flick on your VPN and then go about your day.
Uh-oh, we're after Starbucks now. I'll just leave it alone and we'll go on to the next one.
I got another question here from me. I seem to recall Express VPN being one of the few VPN providers that independently audit and do not log users. Are there any others?
Jason, what do you think?
VPN is such a commodity when it comes to a commercial scale that everybody is always kind of trying to scramble all over each other to differentiate themselves. Yeah, there are probably a few, but no, I can't think of any others at the moment.
Okay, next question.
Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas, asks, does a VPN really bypass an ISP's efforts to monitor your web service or web surfing?
Web surfing, it says, yeah. John Wallace, start us off. How protected are you?
So it all depends. It depends on the type of VPN you're using. If you're using something that's fully encompassing, it's looking at all the traffic, not to a specific destination. It can help prevent. Using secure DNS can also help prevent an internet provider from looking at it. If you're not using the internet provider's DNS, if you are giving them tons of great information. They're going to use a target and sell ads using your information. What it does, a VPN that's encapsulating everything is going to encrypt that traffic. That traffic is going to basically pass through your ISP without it understanding exactly what it is included. But that doesn't, like an ISP, if they want to, they can understand exactly what's happening. There's lots of different tools, including tools from Cisco called StuffWatch, that they start to understand and assume the type of information that's coming across. So there's no real way to prevent an ISP provider from seeing. They may not see exactly what's in a packet, but if you remember, with the NSA leak a little bit, a couple of years ago, I guess now, there was the metadata they started talking about. But if they know how long you're talking to people, they know who you're talking to, where you are, that starts to form a picture. That's data. That's, all this metadata forms a picture. The same thing the ISP can do to shape a picture of you to advertisers.
And you mentioned DNS, the domain name servers that kind of manage the connections between everybody and everything. Am I hearing that if you don't veil that somehow, there's just too much chance that they'll know basically it's you and kind of your overall surfing habits? Is that, am I getting that right, or am I confused?
Yeah, so DNS is the name service. So it's what is, like, if you go to facebook.com or you go to officehours.global, those searches for information, and every associated link that is included on those pages that provide ad data, any of our information, CDN information, all that information is flowing through those lookup requests that are coming from your computer to their domain name servers. And then they're able to piece that information together and say, oh, he's watching video on YouTube. They don't know exactly what video you're watching on YouTube, but then they can start understanding some information. And a lot of times there's cookies and things like that. They're also able to grab and then start piecing together more information. And then, you have the super cookies, they call them, which then can really start to tell a full picture about who you are, what you're interested in. When you get in a situation as you had with Target years ago where they knew a woman was pregnant before she knew, just based upon the information they had, buying habits, things that are happening that just, and all of a sudden you're getting freaked out because big data, right? But these large patterns were people are patterns. And so it really starts to form a holistic picture of who you are over time, of what you're accessing, what you're going to, and then they're able to sell that information.
That explains what happened to me 20 years ago when a friend of mine was getting married. So I started looking under wedding gifts, and for a month and a half, I was inundated with wedding gift pitches all across the internet from one search. It drove me crazy. Jason Bass, you had some more follow-up?
So yeah, DNS is the phone book of the internet. When you type in a website, it's the thing that turns it into an IP address or a CDN route through an IP address. And to that end, it is an IP kind of call log list. And so your ISP, if you haven't delegated and secured a specific IP address, you are using their their DNS address, because their DNS is part of what people see as the internet connection. So to that end, Comcast CEO can look straight into the camera and say, well, we're not monitoring people per se. We just happen to make all the connections and happen to know the order in which each connection happens to each end node. That's a lot of metadata. So I'll also remind you that independently, if you log into Gmail, Google's going to be able to track you no matter how many VPNs you go through, because of, as John was saying, any sort of super cookie or what have you that is independently aggregating your data. And that's not your ISP, but yeah, it's certainly a big part of the privacy initiative.
The internet is complicated. That's what I figure out every single day. Much more complicated than I ever imagined. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, how do you set up a Tailscale subnet router without compromising the security of other devices on your network? Do you isolate the non-Tailscale-capable devices to a separate internal subnet?
John Wallace.
Yeah, whatever you're exposing, once that Tailscale VPN is in, that entire subnet is exposed. So it'd be beneficial to have those segregated off of anything you don't want sharing with any partner you're providing access to. This would be the use case no matter what type of VPN you're setting up. Once you have that segment exposed out through that, anybody could connect to this network that you allow and run a scan and then start poking at different devices that you have on the network.
Next question.
Next question is for Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What VPN is the most Mac compatible, and what VPN is the most PC compatible?
Interesting question. I'm not sure. Is there I know the interfaces are different, and obviously the code that it runs on is different, but do all of them do basically all the same things? What's the feature sets? Jason, help us out.
Unless you really want to get into the network stacks, the premise of the question doesn't really make sense. If you're comparing the VPNs that do everything correctly, they're going to be supported on modern versions of Windows and Mac OS, period. If you're using an app to do that, you already have negated any sort of advantage that you would have between one protocol and the next.
So under the hood, whether the front end is Mac or PC, what's happening in the back, and my understanding is it's all the same control doing the same kind of things. It's just maybe a difference of what they're exposing to you.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it depends. How do you define compatible? Do you mean compatible meaning easy? Do you mean compatible meaning the best finished product? Do you mean I really can't understand the question in a good way to answer it. It really shouldn't matter.
Yeah, it's one of those things. What's the best keyboard? Well, how do you play? What are you looking for? What do you need to do with it will determine which is best for you. Let's go to the next question.
Hector Rodriguez in Springfield asks, how is using Cloudflare for remote access better than a VPN to a local router or firewall?
John Wallace?
Depends on what solution. For what we're using, where we're exposing specific sites, what we're able to do is install a very small client that will act as a proxy and expose those few things that we want accessible to the public. And you're able to put it behind Cloudflare's security. You can have multi-factor authentication, and it's a very simple, easy setup. So there is benefit to that versus exposing an entire subnet and then having to have someone have a client or configure their local machine to connect to this to then access it. It just depends on the use case. Cloudflare provides a basic or old school VPNs as well, instead of just the tunnel solution. So there's lots of different options when you look at any of the providers.
Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, what's the best VPN for travel on planes and trains, etc.?
Ooh, are the mobile versions much different? Nigel's going to help us out. Nigel, you travel a ton.
I don't know it makes a lot of difference which vehicle you are in, but I can tell you that I use Express VPN, but I use Express VPN for a very simple reason. When I'm using it for traveling, I want a service I can turn on and off. And these services are notoriously easy to connect to and notoriously difficult to cancel. And I have found Express VPN, well, difficult to cancel. After an email or two, I can cancel it. And I tend to turn it on and off each month. I've been very comfortable with it. I've used it in the UK. I've used it in the Caribbean. I've used it in other places as well. And I have found it to be stable, easy to use, and fairly easy to cancel. I don't know if being on a plane or a train makes any difference. That's more to do with the network on the plane or the train and what they will allow, because often they limit what you can get.
Yeah, I got a pitch from somebody who wanted me to talk to them about doing some stuff for the real estate industry. And the last time I think I fired up a VPN, and I use IPVanish, was simply I had to do some research into real estate websites and things like that. And I just thought, I don't want to be getting tons of realtors and realtor people kind of hitting me with pitches because they think I'm looking for real estate investment things. So I'll go ahead and fire up the VPN, do the search on, local real estate and things like that, and then dive out of it immediately when it's done. I was probably on there for 5 or 10 minutes, but that's kind of my profile. I don't use these for complicated things. I just use them for a little bit of, I just want this topic not to show up in my feed so that I don't get hammered because I know this is a big hot button for things. Everybody's different. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, I've tried ZeroTier and currently use Tailscale. Are there any advantages to Netbird or Netmaker?
John Wallace?
I've not used Netbird or Netmaker, but if you're happy with your current solution and you don't have any needs that's not meeting, I'd avoid the gas, and it's okay to be satisfied if you have a product that's meeting your needs. Otherwise, you can every 3 or 4 months, another product will come out that does the same thing. I think they have a new, different little spin on it. It can just be a big waste of time.
We need to do a whole hour on gas, gear acquisition syndrome. We are all infected one way or another by it. I know I am. Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asks, where do tools like Ghostery fit into tracking data away?
Jason Beish.
So Ghostery is a web browser plugin that basically gives you more control over JavaScript and beacons that are embedded in web pages. And it has some kind of basic canvas fingerprinting protections, but again, it's only going to be as good as your subscription to a hardy block list and of course its recency. So yeah, it's a browser plugin. It's not really the same.
John Wallace, you want to expand?
Yeah, I'll just add this. It's free, so you're the product. So whatever they're blocking, they're using and tracking information, reselling it. So there's no cost to a service you're using.
Tracked by tracking you. Is that what you're saying? Basically?
I'm just saying it's free. There's no reason people do anything for free if this is a business. So
there you go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back. John, your discussion about web trackers is eye-opening. I currently use AdGuard. Would it provide a decent amount of protection from trackers?
Jason, what do you think? No sense to John, but Jason raised a hand. So first, Jason.
Okay. I don't think of tracking as a quantifiable thing other than less is better, more is worse. So like it depends on how you're using the web and your understanding of what it's actually doing. For example, most people think that antivirus prevents virus infection and not really. So, Douglas, I would look into uBlock Origin and recognize that any sort of web browser's plugin is only as good as its subscribed definitions for, what it's blocking and filtering.
John?
Yeah, I mean, any product that helps, prevent some information from getting out, this looks like it has a way to purchase it. So at least you're probably not the product here. Understand their terms of service, read them closely, understand what information they're sharing, who they're sharing with it. I've never used this in the past, but like Jason said, it's a layered approach where you want to layer things in place in order to make sure that you're protecting yourself as much as you can. But again, if you're using any free services, you're already the product. So I don't know what you're preventing. Most of these are shared across 3 major ad providers. So there's not a lot to get away from there.
Let's go on to the next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana asks, do tools like Chrome Desktop Remote open any vulnerabilities on a device?
Jason's going to help us out, then Guy. Jason?
So if I remember correctly, Chrome Desktop Remote is authenticating on the basis of your Google credential, so it is exactly as secure as your Google credential, however you are choosing to secure that. So the answer is yes.
There you go. Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are asking some of the questions might just be better off using something like Chrome Remote Desktop to just look at a screen remotely and not deal with the slow speeds. Because, say, for instance, I have a 5,000 gigabit or 5,000 megabit per second connection. I wish I had a bigger one, but I'm able to take over a screen through Splashtop, and it's completely secure. This is the security that banks use, government agencies use. So Splashtop's super secure, and I'd imagine Google's about the same, where you can just look at pixels on a screen, and good luck decrypting all of that in real time. So I would say think about what you're doing. We use VPNs for control and for file transfers. So if we need to control vMix, we use our VPN to control our stream decks into vMix, and that's a good use case. But as far as transferring files around, it's so much easier just to use Dropbox or one of the other providers, because you're getting the full speed, full bandwidth. Because some of these VPNs, I mean, they're god awful slow. I mean, 100 megabits, that's a joke. I mean, if you need to throw a video file through that, good luck. I mean, it's going to take you a while.
So basically what I'm hearing from you, and this is interesting to me, is that sometimes you can go too far depending on your vulnerability. If you really don't need these top tier tools to veil or to tunnel or to do whatever you need to do, that it sometimes might be more efficient. You'll put less system load on your system if you use something simple that does the basic protections, but that doesn't get you into this world of high-end stuff. Is that what I'm hearing, Guy?
Well, there's other ones like we use Zoho Assist at the office, and that one's another popular. TeamViewer is another one. So again, just reaching over remote desktop. These are ones that can just look at the pixels, and you're just looking at pixels. So it's a different way of going inside to do work on a remote computer. So it just depends on what you're trying to do. But I think a lot of people that are doing this to shift around a location, you got to ask yourself why and what speeds do you realistically need. So like if I needed to edit a DaVinci Resolve project, which I've done from the airport, I've used Splashtop on my iPad, which was surprisingly good. I was just testing it out, and I just needed to do something simple, which was import a file and export a file, and I did it while waiting for a plane, and it was shocking how good it was. So sometimes you don't want to VPN in, even though I had my little GLI slate. So this is another thing to take a look at is, so I have a Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro. You can create a VPN hardware-wise, and then you can use a GLI slate, and you can open up that VPN connection, and then you're totally secure. So when I'm on the road in a hotel or something like that, that's how I'm utilizing. And I'm a newbie to VPN, but there's just different ways that I use different tools. So a lot of times I'm using screen sharing way more than a VPN because I don't need the VPN. I just need to reach into my computer, do something like export a file, then pull it back, and that's all done through a desktop interface.
Cool. Next question.
Next question's from Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York. Have tried Namecheap and Surfshark VPNs when traveling, such as using airport Wi-Fi's more securely. What brands do panels suggest?
Jason, another one of those questions.
Okay, I have to reiterate what Jaan said earlier. If you don't pay for a service, you're the product. And in this case, Namecheap and Surfshark, I don't believe their primary thing is not primarily VPN. So yeah, they may have, done an acquisition and they wanted to be able to say, yeah, we do that too. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend either of those. Here's the real answer. Don't ever use airport Wi-Fi.
Okay, that's pretty simple. Nigel.
Yeah, so I use Express VPN. I've said that. I do pay for it. But I think the point that Jason was making is really key. And it connects to a bigger thought. You have to really decide the vulnerability that you're willing to live with. I mean, there's an element on the internet that there is no, as my old boss used to say, there is no privacy, get over it. It's too late. That horse left the stable a long time ago. So they know everything about you already. And then if you accept that and you don't go to sites that you shouldn't because they're bad sites, generally you're going to be fine. If it is ultra secure and you need something that is commercially sensitive, then you've got to buy yourself, if you're traveling, one of those little separate systems that can connect to a VPN, that can go outside, probably even the airport Wi-Fi, by one of those little hotspots or things. But be careful. Don't get completely paranoid about your day-to-day because mostly they know everything already. But if you're doing something commercially sensitive, then don't rely on public services.
Next question.
Next question's from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. What are the thoughts on running an open VPN server at home?
Jason, what are the pluses and minuses?
Well, anything that you open to the public internet, you need to secure. And if you don't know how to secure it, then I hope you have hardware that steps you through it very, very easily and simply. Also, if you don't know what it's for, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And, things like Ubiquiti make this insanely easy. I mean, just wildly easy. So, it is a doable thing. Just understand what it's for and what it's not for.
John Wallace?
My only thoughts are have a plan to patch it, have a really good cycle that you hold yourself accountable to. You're opening up yourself and your network to external actors. As soon as there's a vulnerability that's not addressed, somebody will find it and they'll find their way onto your home network. How exposed that is depends on how you segregate your home network, but it's definitely a risk that I don't prefer to have.
Sounds like more and more it's just understand your risk profile. I'm boring, and I'm happy to be boring on the internet because I don't want to give people reasons to try to find me. Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, are there any VPN brands to beware of or to avoid any reason, for any reason? Avoid for any reason. Jason, what do you think?
So I think you're talking about commercially available for the web browsing VPNs. And I'm going to say it again. If you're not paying for a service, you are the product, period.
Yeah, that's been kind of an old saw in the whole advertising world forever, and I think it's never been more true. Let's go to the next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York asks, I'd like to have a VPN for remotely accessing files on my home and work network. What is the best way to do this to ensure security and quick access?
John Wallace?
Unless you're the owner of the business, I highly suggest you do not connect to your work network without being authorized to do so. As far as getting access to home, a lot of those solutions Guy was talking about, where you just have a remote desktop where you could then access the files, email anything you need to yourself for work. That typically is what I do. If you have a Ubiquiti router or any sort of router that offers a VPN solution, look into that. I've had it with the Asus in the past, as well as the current router I have today, which is a Ubiquiti Dream Machine. So those are the easiest way to get it set up if you have something built in. Otherwise, you're looking into a much more complicated solution that potentially opens up some risk.
John, next question. I'm sorry.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas asks, what VPN plays best with a Ubiquiti Dream Machine ecosystem?
We've heard that mentioned before. Jason, what do you think?
This is a great question, because I think what it shows is you're thinking of this as a product. This is something that is simply a way to do networking. The answer is Ubiquiti does all sorts of site-to-site IPsec via VPN automatically. Like, you log into the router, you configure it, and you are simply connecting on the back of math and the public internet back to your router. So there is no need to have a VPN service. You're doing it to yourself straight back.
Okay, next question.
David Brady in New York City asks, I use Real VNC and its Cloud Connect feature to get to home from abroad. What's the pro and con with this versus a traditional VPN to home?
John Wallace, help him out.
I think the biggest pro for you is you're using a proxy and you're not publicly exposing your internal network or devices. As far as a con, there's going to be some latency because you're connecting to that intermediate. But honestly, I don't have a problem with that. If you need real time, Parsec's a good option. It's just a little bit more complicated to set up depending on if you're in any sort of double NAT situation on either side.
Perfect. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, if you were setting up an OH rack at a school for internal production, but occasionally used for backhauled remote feeds, what VPN solution would you use to manage to access it?
John Wallace?
We use Parsec, so that's what I would use. Not a VPN.
I hear about Parsec a lot. Can you explain just a little more about what that software program is?
Yeah, it's allows direct access to machines using software that's installed on both sides. Because it's a direct connection, not going through a third party or any sort of intermediate, it's very fast. It can offer very high throughput if you pay for it. It also has like 444 color. So it's really good representation. It's really built for gaming and production needs.
Okay, so this is basically a tunnel that you're creating just between the two servers.
Two machines, yeah. Yep.
Two machines. Okay, cool. Guy Cochran?
Yeah, I was going to say the same. With Parsec, it feels like you're on a local machine. When you use something like Microsoft's Remote Desktop or TeamViewer or Zoho, the color's not as crisp. You get pixels that are just jaggy. Whereas when you pay for Parsec Teams, you'll get Warp, which is 444 color. Splashtop for Business also has the ability to pay for additional color. So the base rate is like $10 a month or something like that. So I have Splashtop running on this Mac over here for Oliver to remote into. And for him, I asked him, how's it feel? How's it look? And he's like, it's just like it's my local machine. So that's one of the neat things about using one of these higher end. So don't just use Zoho. I mean, Zoho is good if you just need to do some basic stuff like copying a file over and viewing some certain things real quick. But if you want to actually feel like you're editing in Resolve or playing back video files, Splashtop and Parsec are the two that we use for our cloud instances and for taking over other remote computers. take a look at those.
Cool. Next question.
Next question is from Ronnie Hofso in Tromsø, Norway. Controlling a remote ATEM behind a GL Inet router running Tailscale with the BMD software seems to be difficult. Is the ATEM protocol known to be difficult to use this way? Currently using Campanion and Satellite.
Again, we didn't have it. This is kind of a specific question, Ronnie, and I don't have any clue, obviously, but we haven't had any hands raised on this, so this may be a little beyond the skill set of where we are today with this. I don't want to just whiff on it, but it looks like you're going to stump us for this one, so I'm going to go on. Jason's going to be brave and dive into this. Good, Jason. Go for it.
You know what I'll do? I'll reread Mickey's perfect answer. ATEM control is extremely chatty. Use a proxy control system over the VPN.
Oh, there we go. Hopefully, Ron, that helps. We'll talk to you later. And next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York asks, read that consumer VPN services just resell services from larger brands like Visible Resells, Verizon. Who are the main players?
Oh, yeah. He read somewhere that I've run across that a lot. You think you got 10 different companies out there, but they're all selling you the same thing with just front end and just different branding on it. Is that the case here, Jason?
So I wouldn't actually be concerned with who are the main players. In this case, what matters is who is physically closest to where you want to be and possibly where you want to emerge if you're looking for geographic separation. And who has the most bandwidth to dump at you, because really all those are going to be the win for you. And so again, bigger is not better in this case.
Next question.
We have Ross Good-Jones from Madison, Indiana asking, what resources do you use to stay current on vulnerabilities? What do you trust?
Jason?
Oh, man. Steve Gibson is amazing. So Security Now is fantastic. I don't know. Brian Krebs on security is pretty great. And, our own tiny little federal government is always having a running set of exposures that are the continuing vulnerabilities that tick up every year. And I will always keep up on that. So anyone else have anything to add? But those are my three.
I don't think so, and that's fine. We always go until we're run out of questions. We have run out of questions for today. Thank you, everybody, for being here, particularly the panelists who came in today. This is a tough subject, and we got a lot of good information out there. We didn't solve every single thing, but we did solve, hopefully, a lot for you. That's what we're here for. Thank you for tuning in. We are going to be back tomorrow doing this all over again. So if you have a question you think about in the middle of the night about this, remember that while today was specifically focused on that, and we had thank you, Jason, and thank you, John, particularly, for being here to help us sort out this heavy-duty network stuff. But for everybody else, just continue to ask your questions. We're here to try to help you in any way we can every day. Our Telect Traversal, I'm going to do that at the tail end. I first want to say my thank yous, because the thank yous are incredibly important. And today is an exceptional example of why the panelists who show up every day and freely pass out their knowledge and expertise is what makes this show really what it is. So to every panelist who showed up today and all the panelists who showed up all week, all month, and for the past 4 years, thank you very, very much for contributing your expertise. For those of you who asked questions today, thank you. This entire discussion is driven by what you need to learn, and we appreciate the fact that you ask questions. That's what drives the show. And never going to forget them, all the people in the back end who wake up every single day here at office hours, log in, and perform so many functions behind the scenes, audio, video, communications, tie really the show together with this global village that we've been managing to put together every single day for the last 4+ years. You all amaze me. Telect Traversal, if you had gone to everybody who answered a question today or posed a question, 112,000 miles, 180,000 kilometers, that is 884 million bananas for scale. Jason is showing you the Imperial Standard banana.
My banana's VPN connected right now. See? There it is.
There's Perfect. The definition of an air gap. That's a banana air gap. Thank you all for being here. We'll see y'all tomorrow.
Man, now I have to teach this banana DHCP and NAT traversal to get it back together.
Is there a banana fusion device that can repair?
I'm working on it.
Yeah,
Charging up the hot glue gun.
Surgery.
I vote for this episode to be called Banana Air Gap.
Thanks
you all for
the day,
being
John.
here. If I'd had to stumble through this without you guys, this would have been an abject disaster. So thank you all for being here. I truly appreciate it.